Mom and stepdad disowned me, left me out of the will to favor my stepbrother, and treated me like I didn't belong. But now, years later, they're begging for my help. I'm not even sure where to begin, but I feel like I need to get this out. My life flipped completely when I was 14, and even now, years later, I'm still trying to process everything. Maybe writing it out will help. Here's the thing. My mom, Lisa, married my now stepdad, Steve, when I was 14. Before that, it had just been the two of us for as long as I could remember. My dad passed away when I was 7, heart attack, completely unexpected. I didn't really understand what was happening at the time, just that one day he was there and the next he wasn't. My mom tried her best to keep things together after that. She worked long hours as a receptionist at a dentist's office and still somehow managed to be home in time to help me with homework or cook dinner. We weren't rolling in money, but we made it work, and for a while, it felt like we were a team. When Steve came into the picture, everything started to change. He wasn't anything special, just a guy my mom met through a coworker. He worked random construction jobs and liked to talk a big game about all the projects he was working on, though I never saw him stick with anything for long. My mom, though, was completely smitten. He's dependable, she'd say, or he makes me laugh. Again, after years of watching her struggle, I think she just wanted someone to lean on. I get that now, but at the time, all I saw was some guy moving into our house and trying to act like he belonged. And then there was Tyler, Steve's 17-year-old son. He wasn't just part of the deal, he was a deal breaker, at least for me. From the moment he walked in, it was clear he wasn't interested in being part of a family. Tyler came with an attitude, a stack of bad habits, and zero respect for the fact that this had been our home first. At first, I told myself we'd adjust, that this was just new for all of us, but it didn't take long to realize that wasn't going to happen. Guess who was my biggest problem back then? Guess, Tyler. He was a lot. He had this cocky attitude like he was doing us a favor just by existing. He'd leave his shoes in the middle of the living room, dirty dishes in the sink, and trash everywhere. The worst part? Steve acted like Tyler could do no wrong. If something went missing or got broken, the one who got blamed was obviously me. One time, Tyler borrowed my headphones without asking and then left them in his gym bag, where they got smashed. When I told Steve, his exact words were, "Well, maybe you shouldn't leave your things lying around." I felt my face burn with frustration. I didn't say anything, but that night I moved all my important stuff into my backpack and started carrying it with me everywhere. If they weren't going to respect my things, I'd make sure they didn't get the chance to ruin anything else. It wasn't just the headphones, it was the principle. How could someone casually destroy my things and still look so smug, like it was his right? And why did no one ever call him out on it? The worst part was my mom watching from the kitchen, silent as always. I wanted her to defend me, to say something, anything, but all I got was the usual blank stare. I think that was the theme of those years, be the bigger person. Tyler would throw these loud parties while Steve and my mom were out, and I'd get yelled at for not cleaning up after his friends the next morning. I left the mess exactly as it was, sticky floors, empty cups, and all. When Steve and my mom came home, I was sitting in the kitchen calmly eating cereal. Steve shot me a glare and muttered something about responsibility, but I flinched. Let them clean it up for once. Then came something I didn't expect. My mom and Steve announced they were expecting a baby a few months after getting married. When they announced the baby, Steve's grin stretched so wide it was like he'd already won Dad of the Year. My mom beamed, clutching his arm like this was the best thing to ever happen. Meanwhile, I sat frozen at the dinner table, picking at my food and swallowing the lump in my throat. This wasn't joy, it was a warning, another reminder that there was no room for me in this new family. Once the baby, Ethan, was born, it didn't take long for things to shift, and not in my favor. Suddenly, the house turned into a baby center. Steve and my mom were constantly running around, baby-proofing everything, while the rest of us were expected to just adapt. I started noticing little changes. At first, a crib being assembled in the living room, stacks of diapers lining the hallway, and boxes of baby supplies taking over the kitchen counter. Then one evening after dinner, Steve made an announcement. "We're going to need to rearrange some things for the nursery," he said, glancing in my direction. "It just makes sense for us to use the bigger room." I froze. I knew exactly what he meant. My room was about to be taken from me. The next weekend, Steve and my mom barged into my room armed with boxes and trash bags. "We'll just move your things into the guest room," they said, as they hauled my stuff out of my room like a bad eviction scene. Steve kept tossing out lines about family sacrifices. If anyone was sacrificing here, it sure wasn't the guy stealing my room for a crib. It felt like a robbery. They barged in like amateur movers on a tight deadline, shoving my stuff into boxes and dismantling my room before I could even process what was happening. At least thieves have the decency to do it when you're not home. I just stood there frozen, gripping the doorframe as my world shrank into a cold, dark room down the hall. I spent the rest of the day hauling my things down the hall to the guest room while they transformed my old room into the perfect nursery. Getting booted to the guest room was like being sent to the penalty box in my own house. No desk, no shelves, and the heater barely worked. Guess I should have been grateful they didn't shove me in the garage. When I tried to set up my study materials, Steve came in and told me to keep the clutter to a minimum because the room needed to stay tidy. Well, now we have Tyler, the golden boy who could do no wrong, and Ethan, the new center of attention. Meanwhile, I was just there. I tried to talk to my mom about it once, but she got defensive and said I was being selfish. "This is your family now," she said. "You have to make it work." But it never worked. Steve treated me like a nuisance. Tyler was a constant source of stress, and my mom was too busy trying to keep everyone happy to notice how miserable I was. By the time I was 15, I'd figured out that no one in the house was going to look out for me. My mom was too caught up in keeping Steve happy. Steve had no interest in me unless it was to point out something I'd supposedly done wrong, and Tyler, he was just doing his thing, acting like a king in a house I didn't even feel like I belonged in. So, I adapted. I'd stopped trying to fit into their version of a family and started focusing on getting through each day. I wasn't defiant or rebellious. I wasn't sneaking out or breaking rules or anything like that. I just made myself invisible as much as I could. School became my safe zone. I joined every club that would take me to keep myself busy. I stayed after school to work on projects or hang out in the library. One day after one of these clubs, Mr. Jacobs, our advisor, stopped me randomly. "You know, you've got potential, Ethan," he said, tapping a stack of papers on his desk, "but you've got to think bigger. Don't let your circumstances limit you." I didn't tell him about my home life, but I guess he felt that there was something off about me. The way he said it stuck with me. At that time, I started imagining a future beyond that house, one where I could finally breathe. Sometimes, I'd even just wander the hallways, killing time so I wouldn't have to go home. When I wasn't at school, I'd crash at my friend Jim's house. His parents were cool about it, and I think they could tell something was off with my situation, but they never pried. Home wasn't just uncomfortable, it was suffocating. Tyler made sure of that. He'd blast his music so loud the walls shook, invite his friends over to play video games until the middle of the night, and hog the bathroom in the morning so I was always late getting ready. Steve didn't care. If anything, he encouraged it. "Tyler's a teenager," he'd say, like that was some kind of excuse for him to act like a jerk.